Welcome to another demo video. So today we are automating a relatively simple use case. Customers are sending emails to an email inbox, and we'd like to have those emails show up in Google Drive so we can then do further processing there. And so this basically would start with a Gmail trigger where we care about new incoming emails. And then what we want to do is we want to look at the summary of the email, and if the summary contains a certain value, then we want to take the attachments and we want to upload them to a Google Drive folder. So to show this, let's take this email here. We've attached the form, but also the summary contains basically this square bracket part, and so it's this value here that we care about. Now, in reality, we probably would do something different. We would match email addresses to folders, but for now we keep it simple and we'll say that's basically the folder where we want to upload the email into. And so if we go to Google Drive, let's say we're starting with a new folder, which is customer incoming email or incoming email data. And we'll say in here we basically want to have the data show up based under the customer's folder. So in this case, let's say this would be basically customer 12345, which is what the email is that I'm having in here. And so yeah, in order to start this automation, so new dash, you basically prompt the system what you want, and it will develop the automation rule for you. So what's different with new dash compared to other automation systems is we have a coding agent that takes care of the actual implementation, except the parts that ultimately are difficult from an operational perspective, and that is basically triggers as well as managing connectivity, configuration, and passwords. So in this case, we'll tell the agent, we'll start explaining what we want to do. And so, yeah, let's start with so this is a little bit cumbersome. We can come up with something better, but for this test, let's just use this and see how it goes. I have not tried this before, so this is all those tests I do and demo. They are basically live or first try demos. And so what we are now saying is basically that's the folder that we want it in. I've done that with underscores. We could probably, it's a little ugly. Let's actually try whether we can do this with spaces. Okay. So yeah, what we are basically saying here is we want to look at incoming emails, and if an email contains the marker in the title, then extract that marker and upload it to Google Drive under the given under the given directory. So let's see how that goes. We can also say if the directory does not yet exist, I want you this means we don't have to worry about creating those directories up front. So, and so what now is happening is we've provided that information to the agent. We are starting out with a draft version where the agent works on implementing the functionality. Let's wait for the system to kick in. So we currently still scale down to 0, so it takes a bit of time for the system to start up. Okay, so now the agent's kicked in. And so it'll start by looking for information that it needs. In this case, we need a Gmail trigger. It wrote a document describing basically what needs to happen. And it wrote the automation rule. And now it writes the code for the various pieces of the rule. And so what it's basically doing here, it's saying, yeah, it'll extract the custom identity attachments from the email and then uploads it to Google Drive. So the next step that's happening basically is the agent is running the automation. So the agent is running the automation, and the very first thing that will happen is the automation starts with an incoming email trigger. And so the way the system works is the user develops the rule together with the agent. And so there are parts that the agent effectively can't do because it needs user input. And so in this case, the question is, what email inbox are we actually targeting? And so it'll show up basically here as you need to configure something. And so in this case, it wants to connect to a Google account. And so we've already created one previously. So let's not go through that setup again, but I'll connect to the email inbox of this user. And so I select that. And so the very next thing that'll happen is it'll effectively try to rerun or it'll try to continue running this rule. And so it fetched, what it's doing under the hood is it fetches an email from the inbox, the latest one that it can find, and then uses that to run the rule. Now you'll notice we haven't actually sent an email to that inbox, so it would effectively fail. But there's also something else that failed in this case. So the agent made a mistake in how it wrote the code, and so it has to fix up the code and effectively run and so the way the system works is the code runs, the code fails, and it's handed back to the agent for the agent to fix it, which in this case it did. And so now that it ran successfully, it stopped again. And so the reason it stopped is it still needs to talk to Gmail. This first part was basically for the trigger. This one is for the rule itself to talk to Gmail to do stuff. And so it asks us one more time for this. However, what you see here is it actually needs more information. It also wants to have access to Google Drive so it can do things with Google Drive. That's because the next step basically wants Google Drive. And so what we have to do now is we have to do an OAuth dance where we go and grant those additional permissions. So again, the system basically ad hoc, when it runs into a problem, asks for the user to help out. So we can continue executing or solving problems as we are working through the different steps. If it's a coding error that the agent solves itself, it basically gets handed to the agent. But if it's something that needs user input, the user is prompted. And so we are choosing now Gmail. And so now the rule will continue running. And what we see here now is the subject doesn't actually contain a marker, right? And so it effectively stops the workflow. And let me see what the agent now says. And so, okay, the agent now says, well, the workflow is ready to use. And we kind of know that's not true because the email that we tested with is not a good email. We can probably see here what email came in. No, we cannot. The content of the email is stored. Is actually you don't see here what the content of the email is, but you see that there's an email ID that was used basically here. And so what I propose we do next is we actually go and send an email with that information, so we have something useful inside the inbox. And so let's see whether that's come through. So okay, so this email that it actually picked before was this one here, and so that email is created every time we do an OAuth login with Google. We get this currently because we haven't verified our integration. But this time around, we've got an email with the attachment. This is a sample form I downloaded from the internet. It's not very interesting, but it's so we have an attachment. And so what we can do now is we can go and retest the rule. And so we'll just run the rule one more time. And so this time around, the expectation is that it will use the latest email again, except it works slightly differently this time around. So let's see what it did. Okay, it still couldn't find the customer. Let's see why that is. So what's happening under the hood is that the trigger has been set up at the start. And so we've effectively received those emails. The latest one that came through would be the one that we've just sent, right? You see this came from, sorry, that's the target email address. It should basically be using this email. Now, clearly it's not working. And so you should basically tell the agent, look, not working, do better. And so I'll effectively ask it, look, change things around to see, so we can see what's not working correctly. Maybe we'll quickly look at, yeah, so this was okay. I see I don't have an underscore there. Did I tell it? Yeah, I did tell it to use an underscore. And so it's actually because I use this cumbersome way of pulling it out from there. No wonder it hasn't worked. But interesting enough, this time around, I ask it to provide data. And so what's interesting now is the agent actually realized, yeah, the format is wrong, right? And so it basically this time around could realize, oh, that we actually just need to change the format of the thing. And so what's happened now is the agent has changed the code in order to pull out the data appropriately. And so it managed to pull out the attachment information this time around because and it managed to pull out the right custom ID. However, this last step, we still need to upload to Google Drive, and most likely that's another permission that we don't have. And so it basically asks one more time to connect to Google. We'll do that. This is purely so on each step you basically can choose what you want to connect to. Because, for example, you might use account 1 to monitor the emails, but you use account 2 to upload to Google Drive. So for some reason, it effectively feels it's finished, but it's not. So this is a bug in our system. So we're just going to rerun the whole workflow one more time and see whether it passes this time around. Okay, so this time around, it basically said it could figure it out, except it didn't work. That's pretty funny. So what did it say? It did upload it. Ah, okay, so it did manage to upload. This is pretty interesting. It created it twice. Did I do a typo in here? I did not. That is very astonishing. So the astonishing things happens while using the platform. So in this case, it actually created the folder structure itself. I feel that's a bug that it probably should not have done. Um, I'd suggest we are trying this out one more time and see whether we can reproduce this. But overall, as a system, I think this sort of shows at least the potential of the system. So I haven't actually coded anything myself here, right? I've just clicked around in order to set up connectivity, and I've basically interacted with the agent in order to write this rule. This, because the agent is writing the code and not me, this system effectively scales together with as the agent and the coding models out there get better, the capability of the system gets better, which is pretty exciting. Um, so I'll send a different email with a different customer ID, with the idea hopefully that this causes something else to happen. I can quickly show this. Yeah. So I just also want to be able to upload we'll use the same form. And we'll see what happens. Now, one thing I haven't shown, which basically I should have done, is this trigger here was set up at this point. And so what that means is we are getting events here that are coming in. And you see just now, this was the email that I just sent. However, because the rule is still in draft, this trigger isn't actually active. And so it didn't automatically run the rule, which is fine because we can just retest it in this case. And what it'll do, it'll basically always use the latest event that's here. And so we just run it again and see what happens this time around. I have a sinking suspicion it might create yet another parent directory, but we'll find out. Okay, this finished. You'll see how quickly it actually runs. So there's a big difference of an automation system that ultimately is running code versus using agents to do all the work. It's just faster. Okay, so this works still well, and I assume now it's added the second customer here. And so this is basically the file that was uploaded. So this works. The part that I'm still puzzled about is why it created another folder here. I must be blind because I can't see the difference between the two. But that's problem for another day. Let's go ahead now and say, okay, this rule is complete. Let's activate the rule. And so activating the rule now basically asks you to also activate the trigger. And so we'll go ahead and do that. What that effectively means is now the system is live, and you get two new tabs. So you get an overview with the information of the rule and basically description that the agent has written, as well as versions. So you could go and create a new draft if you want to change the automation, as well as an executions tab where you effectively see the rule runs as they have happened. And so let's create one more email. I think we're gonna reuse the same one from before because we expect that to end up in the same directory. And so let me just create a copy of that. Oh, that is not what I wanted. Yeah, that uploaded it. Okay, so we'll send it again. And this time around, the expectation is that this automatically triggers. And so the email should come in. If the demo gods work, it'll basically get picked up by here, and it did. And so the automation runs, it pulls out the attachment and then uploads the attachment. And so you see the speed is actually pretty staggering. There you go. Here the attachment has shown up. And so this is an end-to-end demo of a relatively simple rule that we've put together without actually writing any code ourselves. Under the hood, this actually wrote a code for the different nodes. So there's the code for uploading an attachment. There's the code for pulling out the details out of Gmail and basically downloading the attachment. And then the overall system basically takes care. There's also configurations that have to do with the Gmail account that we use. We use the same account for all the steps in this case. And so, yeah, that's as a result that you've basically seen from start to finish how to build an automation rule using Gmail as a trigger, as well as Google Drive as the place where data would end up. Now, in reality, this now putting my programming hat or engineer hat on, this idea that you pull out the value from the summary is probably not so great. You could, because one customer could effectively just change that summary and then send stuff in a different way. So I personally would rather have a way how you can match email addresses from people sending data in to specific folders, or you could directly use the email address as a folder, but that's kind of not a good idea either, because you don't want customer personal identified information show up in Google Drive directly. So I would have a mapping from one to the other. So so it can look up, for example, in the Google Sheet, it could look up from the email address what folder to use, and then basically use that mapping. And so, yeah, we could actually, you know what? We might as well just do a second video in this series where we are now extending this rule to do exactly that and see whether we can get that working too. So thank you very much for watching, and see you soon.